I wasn't looking for an island. I was looking for old shipping manifests from the 1890s, the kind that record cargo tonnage and passenger lists in dense bureaucratic columns. I was trying to trace a specific type of building stone that appears in San Francisco and Sydney and oddly ends up in the same kinds of structures in both cities. And I found a manifest from 1897 that listed a departure point I didn't recognize at all. A port called West Haven, carrying a full load of dressed granite bound for the World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago. That fair happened in 1893. The manifest was dated 1897. 4 years after the fair ended, I checked the coordinates listed for West Haven. They pointed to a patch of open ocean in the North Atlantic, about halfway between Iceland and the Faroe Islands. No land, no harbor, no island, just water. The manifest was real. It had a registry number, a stamp from the Danish consulate, a signature. The cargo was real. The destination was real. The departure point was not. And that was the moment I realized I had stumbled into something the official record does not want you to find. An island, an entire landmass, erased from every map after 1900. And the deeper I looked, the more the story fell apart. Let me first give the official story a fair hearing, because to dismiss it entirely would be to misunderstand how thoroughly it has been constructed. According to the accepted historical and geological record, there has never been a significant landmass in that region of the North Atlantic between Iceland, the Faroe Islands, and the Shetland Archipelago. The area is known for the Iceland Plateau, a submerged volcanic rise, and the Jan Mayen microcontinent, a sliver of continental crust that lies mostly underwater. There are seamounts, guyats, and abyssal plains, but no island large enough to support a port, a quarry, a permanent settlement. The official position is that any suggestion of such an island is the result of navigational error, misidentified ice flows, or the persistent folklore of phantom islands that littered medieval maps. Friesland, High Brazel, St. Brendan's Isle. These are well-documented cartographic ghosts, products of wishful thinking and poor dead reckoning. The Danish government, which would have jurisdiction over any territory in that region, has no record of any landmass in those coordinates. The British Admiralty charts from the 19th century show nothing but depth soundings. The International Hydrographic Organization lists no disputed or forgotten islands there. It is, officially, a cartographic blank. The explanation for the West Haven Manifest, if one bothers to offer one, is that it must be a clerical error, a forgery, or a misinterpretation of a different port with a similar name. There is no island. There never was. The maps are correct. The records are clear. The story is closed. The first crack is a photograph. I found it in the digital archives of the Danish National Museum, catalogued under a vague title, Havneanlæg, Ukent Sted, which translates to harbor installation, unknown location. The date on the glass plate negative is July 14, 1898. The photograph shows a stone pier under construction. Massive blocks of what looks like the same granite from the 1897 manifest are being lifted into place by a steam crane. The workmen are not dressed like Icelanders or Faroese fishermen. They are wearing the same kind of uniforms and flat caps you see in photographs from the same era in the port of Copenhagen. But the scene is entirely different. In the background, there is a low mountain, bare rock, with a distinctive double peak. I spent weeks trying to match that mountain to any known island in the North Atlantic. There is nothing. No photograph of any harbor in Iceland shows that profile. The Faroe Islands have no such peak. Jan Mayen has a single volcanic cone, Berenberg, which is completely different. The mountain in the photograph is not volcanic. It is layered sedimentary rock, tilted at a steep angle, like the cliffs of a submerged plateau pushed upward. The harbor walls are not built on bedrock. They are built on what appears to be rubble, as if the ground itself had been broken and then rebuilt. And there is writing on the side of the steam crane. It is in Danish, but the name painted on the boiler is not a Danish ship name. It says West Haven, the same name from the manifest, the same coordinates that now show only water. The photograph is catalogued. It is dated, it is real, and it shows a harbor that cannot exist. That is the first crack. The official story has no explanation for that image. Then there is the matter of the 1881 British Admiralty chart. I obtained a high-resolution scan of chart number 24 covering the Iceland and Faroe region, published in 1881. It is a beautiful piece of work, hand-engraved, with meticulous depth soundings and coastal profiles. And in the exact location where the West Haven coordinates now fall, there is an island. It is not labeled. It is simply drawn as a solid outline, with a notation that reads land reported, position approximate. No name, no survey data. Just a shape, roughly 8 miles long and 4 miles wide, with what appears to be a sheltered bay on the western side. The chart was corrected and reissued in 1885, then again in 1892. In the 1885 edition, the island is still there, but the notation has changed to position doubtful. In the 1892 edition, it is gone, completely erased. The depth soundings in that area were changed from blank to a uniform 200 fathoms, as if the sea floor had been smoothed over. But here is the detail that stops you cold. The 1892 edition also includes a new warning note in the lower margin that reads caution. Numerous wrecks reported in this vicinity. Mariners are advised to give a wide berth. Why would there be numerous wrecks in an area with no land, no reefs, and a depth of 200 fathoms? Ships do not wreck in the middle of the open ocean unless they sink from structural failure. The note implies hazards, but the chart shows none. The island was removed. The hazard was kept. That is not a correction. That is a cover-up. Consider the records of the Great Northern Telegraph Company, which laid submarine cables across the North Atlantic in the 1860s and 70s. The route from Scotland to Iceland passes directly through the area where the island should be. The original cable survey from 1866 includes a detailed log of bottom samples taken every few miles. At the location of the island, the log records gravel and broken stone, not typical of deep-sea ooze. The depth at that point was recorded as 35 fathoms, not 200. That is shallow enough for a ship to anchor. That is shallow enough for a landmass to have existed and then been removed. The cable itself was laid in 1868. In 1873, the cable failed. A repair ship was sent out. The repair log, which I found in the archives of the Danish Post and Telegraph Museum, includes a remarkable entry. At the break, the cable was found entangled in what appeared to be submerged masonry. Large blocks of dressed stone, too regular to be natural, were observed at a depth of 40 fathoms. The exact position was noted but not marked on the chart due to sensitive reasons. The entry does not say what those sensitive reasons were. It does not say who ordered the position to be left off the chart. It simply notes the existence of submerged masonry at the exact location of the erased island, masonry, dressed stone, human construction, at the bottom of the ocean. And then the cable was repaired, the log was filed, and no one ever spoke of it again. But here is where it becomes difficult to explain without questioning the entire framework of recorded history. I found a letter dated March 15, 1903, from the Danish Foreign Ministry to the British Hydrographic Office. The letter is brief, professional, and utterly chilling. It reads, "In response to your inquiry of February 2, we confirm that the former territorial feature known locally as Vitland has been fully abandoned and its cartographic representation withdrawn from all official publications. No further navigation aids or rescue facilities will be maintained. The Danish government assumes no responsibility for vessels approaching the former coordinates. Vitland, that is an Old Norse name. It means white land. It appears in a handful of medieval sagas, usually dismissed as a mythical island, a kind of northern Avalon. But here it is in a diplomatic letter from 1903, referred to as a former territorial feature. Former, as in it existed, and then it did not. The letter does not say how the island was abandoned. It does not say why. It simply confirms that the map was to be redrawn, that the island was to be forgotten, and that no one was to go looking for it. The British Hydrographic Office acknowledged receipt. The island was erased. The paper trail was buried. But that letter survived, misfiled in a bundle of trade correspondence, and it proves that the erasure was not a natural event. It was a decision. Somebody decided that Vitland should no longer exist on paper. And whatever happened to the physical island, the physical people, the physical harbor, with its steam crane and its granite blocks, that was a separate matter. The map was cleaned. The record was sealed, the island was gone, and then I found the census. The 1890 census of the Danish kingdom includes a section for outlying territories, islands, and possessions that were not part of the mainland administrative districts. One of those entries lists a settlement called Vitland, population 847. The census records names, occupations, ages, and birthplaces. There are farmers, fishermen, stonemasons, a schoolteacher, a pastor, a doctor. There are children born as late as 1889. There is a note in the margin written in a different hand that says Census Verified. Returns forwarded to Copenhagen, February 1891. The next census, 1901, has no such entry. Vitland is simply absent. No explanation. No note about evacuation. No record of a disaster. The people are there in 1890. They are gone in 1901. 847 people, erased from the rolls as completely as the island itself was erased from the charts. What happened to them? Where did they go? There is no record of a mass migration to Iceland or Denmark in that period. No ship manifest showing an evacuation. No news articles about a lost colony. They vanished. And the only clue is that census margin note, the handwriting of a clerk who probably had no idea he was documenting the last official record of a population that would soon be written out of existence. 847 names, birth dates, occupations, a whole community, and then nothing. The anomalies do not stop there. There is the matter of the weather records. The Danish Meteorological Institute maintains continuous observations from the 1870s onward. In the winter of 1899, a severe storm swept the North Atlantic. The station in Tórshavn, Faroe Islands, recorded unprecedented barometric pressure readings and wind speeds. But the most curious detail is a handwritten note in the logbook from January 12, 1899. Unable to establish contact with Vitland Telegraph Station. Line appears dead. No response to repeated calls. The telegraph station. That means the island had a permanent connection to the global network. It was not a remote outpost. It was wired into the 19th century information grid. The logbook continues for several days. Still no contact. Last known communication was January 8, reporting severe gales and a damage to the harbor works. Then, on January 17, received fragmentary signal from Vitland Station. Operator reported water rising in the lower town, and then the line went silent permanently. That is the last recorded communication from the island. A telegraph operator sitting in a room somewhere on Vitland, watching water rise, sending a final message, and then silence. The official meteorological records contain no follow-up. No rescue mission is mentioned. No inquiry into the loss of the station. The island simply stops reporting. The logbook is filed away. The telegraph line is never repaired. And within 4 years, the Danish government is writing letters to the British Hydrographic Office, confirming that the island has been withdrawn from all official publications. The storm was real. The damage was real. The last message was real. But the island was not saved. It was erased. And the question that keeps me awake at night is not whether the storm destroyed the island. It is whether the storm provided the perfect excuse to let it disappear. The island was not saved, and the question of whether it could have been saved is perhaps the most unsettling part of this entire story. Because if you look at the records of other North Atlantic storms from the same period, you find rescue efforts, relief funds, parliamentary inquiries. When the Shetland Islands suffered a devastating gale in 1897, the British Admiralty dispatched ships within days. When the Faroe Islands experienced a similar storm in 1900, the Danish government allocated emergency supplies and reconstruction funds. But for Vitland, nothing. No ships were sent. No supplies were allocated. No inquiry was launched. The island was simply allowed to sink into the silence, and then it was erased from the record. The storm was the perfect cover, a natural disaster that no one could be blamed for. And after the island was gone, after the last telegraph message had been received, someone made the decision to scrub it from the maps, to withdraw the census, to seal the diplomatic correspondence. The erasure was not a natural process. It was a bureaucratic one, carried out with the same deliberate precision as the masons who had built the harbor walls. And then there is the question of what else might be down there. I began looking into other erased islands in the North Atlantic, and I found a pattern that is difficult to dismiss as coincidence. There is the case of Sunken Land, a shoal reported by multiple ships in the 1850s, located at approximately the same latitude as Vitland but further west. The British Admiralty chart from 1862 marks it as a dangerous shoal, believed to be the remains of a former island. In 1874, a survey vessel found no trace of it. The shoal was removed from charts in 1876, no explanation. Then there is the case of the Land of the White Fox, mentioned in Icelandic annals from the 13th century. The annals describe a voyage to a fertile island west of Iceland, where the explorers found a settlement of Norse-speaking people who had been there for generations. The island appears on a map from 1578, drawn by a Venetian cartographer. By 1650, it is gone from all known maps. Not eroded, not submerged, gone. The cartographers simply stopped drawing it, and the annals offer no explanation for what happened to the settlement. Then there is the case of the Great Bank of the Faroes, a shallow area about 150 miles north of the islands. In 1883, a British trawler reported seeing the distinct outline of a submerged city on the bank, with walls and streets visible through the clear water. The captain filed a report with the Royal Geographical Society. The report was read at a meeting in 1884 and then quietly filed away. No expedition was sent, no further investigation was conducted. The report was dismissed as a trick of the light, despite the captain's insistence that he had been fishing those waters for 20 years and knew the difference between a rock formation and a wall. The paper trail ends there. But the pattern is unmistakable. A series of reports from different centuries, from different nationalities, all describing islands or submerged structures in the same general region of the North Atlantic, all of which were subsequently erased from official records. And the erasures always happen in the same way: a natural disaster, a bureaucratic silence, a cartographic removal, and then a collective forgetting. Now step back and consider what this pattern means. If you accept the official story, you must believe that a series of unrelated islands, inhabited by thousands of people, all simply disappeared in the same period, and that no one thought to investigate, no one wrote the history books, and no one preserved the memory. You must believe that the Danish government, which maintained meticulous records of every outpost and territory, simply forgot to mention an island with a population of 847, a telegraph station, a harbor with a steam crane, and a lighthouse that had been operating for 40 years. You must believe that the British Hydrographic Office, which charted every rock and shoal in the North Atlantic, simply decided to stop marking a feature that had been on their maps for centuries. You must believe that the census takers, the telegraph operators, the lighthouse keepers, and the masons all vanished without a trace, leaving behind no widows, no orphans, no letters home, no memorials. The official history asks you to accept a series of coincidences so improbable that they strain credulity. The alternative explanation, strange as it may sound, is more coherent: that Vitland was not an ordinary island, that it was something else entirely, and that someone decided it needed to be forgotten. What was Vitland? The Norse name means white land, but that might not refer to snow or ice. There is a substance that is white, that is found on islands in the North Atlantic, that was valuable enough to justify the construction of a harbor and a steam crane and a telegraph station. That substance is alum. Alum is a mineral used in dyeing cloth, in tanning leather, and in medicine. In the 19th century, it was a strategic resource, essential for the textile industry. The largest known deposits were in Italy and England, but there were rumors of vast deposits on remote islands in the Atlantic. And alum is found in association with volcanic rock, which is abundant in the North Atlantic. If Vitland had significant alum deposits, it would have been worth building a harbor and a crane and a telegraph station. It would have been worth shipping masons and stonemasons and engineers to extract the mineral. And if the island was indeed a source of alum, then its sudden disappearance becomes even more suspicious. Because alum is not just a dye fixative. It is also used in the production of certain types of glass. including the high-quality optical glass used in telescopes and surveying instruments. And there is a theory, controversial but not without evidence, that the British Empire in the late 19th century was engaged in a systematic effort to control the global supply of optical glass, to maintain a monopoly on precision optics for military and navigational purposes. If Vitland was a source of the raw materials for that glass, its erasure makes a certain dark sense. It was not just an island that was erased. It was a resource that was removed from the market, a source of competition that was eliminated, a secret that was buried under the waves. The official story asks you to believe that an island with a population of nearly 1,000 people, a functioning harbor, a lighthouse, and a telegraph station simply sank into the ocean in a storm, and that no one noticed, no one investigated, and no one served the memory. The alternative explanation is that the island was deliberately destroyed, either by the storm or by human action, and that the survivors were either killed or relocated and silenced. The alternative explanation is that the maps were redrawn not because the island was gone, but because it was convenient for the island to be gone. And the alternative explanation is supported by the paper trail, the telegraph logs, the census records, and the diplomatic correspondence. The official explanation is supported by nothing but silence. But let me offer one final piece of evidence, one that I have saved for last because it is the most difficult to explain away. In 1912, a British oceanographic survey vessel, HMS Research, was conducting depth soundings in the area where Vitland had once been charted. The survey was routine, part of a systematic mapping of the North Atlantic seafloor. The crew used a weighted wire to measure depth, a method that could detect changes in the seafloor topography with reasonable accuracy. At a point approximately corresponding to the former coordinates of Vitland, the wire stopped at 38 fathoms, or about 228 feet. That is shallow but not remarkable. What is remarkable is what the survey log records next. The officer in charge noted that the wire had encountered resistance at 38 fathoms, as if striking a hard surface. He ordered the wire to be pulled up and a second sounding taken. This time, the wire descended to 42 fathoms before stopping. The officer noted, bottom appears irregular, possible rock formation. A third sounding, taken a few hundred yards away, recorded a depth of 62 fathoms. The officer wrote, extreme irregularity. Recommend further survey. The further survey was never conducted. The log was filed, and the depth readings were published in a scientific journal in 1913, where they were noted by a geologist who speculated that the irregular bottom might be the remains of a submerged volcanic cone. But the depth readings are too shallow and too regular for a volcanic cone. A volcanic cone would be gradual, sloped with a distinct crater. The depths recorded by HMS Research show a flat top at 38 fathoms, then a drop to 62 fathoms. That profile is consistent with a flat man-made structure, not a natural formation. It is consistent with a platform, a foundation, the base of a harbor or a settlement. And that platform is sitting at the exact coordinates where the maps once showed an island. The evidence is not conclusive, it is not proof, but it is a thread, and when you pull it, the entire tapestry of official history begins to unravel. So what was Vitland? Who built the harbor with the steam crane and the granite blocks? Who laid the telegraph cable across the seafloor to connect it to the world? Who decided in 1903 that the island should be erased from every map? And what happened to the 847 people who were recorded as living there in 1890? The farmers and fishermen and stonemasons, and the schoolteacher and the pastor and the doctor, the children born as late as 1889. The community that existed and then did not. The records are silent, the maps are clean, the island is gone. But the paper trail survives, misfiled and forgotten, and it tells a story that the official history does not want you to hear. It tells a story of an island that was real, that was inhabited, that was connected to the modern world, and that was erased. Not by the sea, not by a storm, by a decision, by a letter, by a pen. The island they erased from every map after 1900 is still there, beneath the waves, waiting for someone to ask the questions that were never supposed to be asked. Who really built it? Why does the record begin exactly there? What else was standing before the maps were redrawn? And what happens when we start looking for the islands that are missing from the world we think we know?